These are 5 episodes where Mr. Garrison believed in the most ridiculous things and defended them no matter what. Starting with the episode where Mr. Garrison invents a transportation device called IT, convinced that it will revolutionize the transportation industry, even though its design is extremely inappropriate. And when I say extremely, it is extremely inappropriate. So, Mr. Garrison waits impatiently for his turn to be checked by airport security, who ironically only have one space available for him to pass through.
Excuse me, there's 2 other security checkpoints. Why can't you open those too?
Are all airports the same? Because I'm having deja vu. Despite his complaints, Mr. Garrison fails to board his flight and simply takes his anger out on the attendant.
This is unbelievable. You know, I seem to remember when the airline said we need a $15 billion bailout from the taxpayers.
Okay, and have any of your personal items been out of your possession since you left?
As always, the airline is not responsible for making him miss his flight, and that makes Mr. Garrison have a rather peculiar revelation.
You think you can treat us however you want because we have to fly? Well, I'll tell you what, Sally Sassalot, I'm gonna come up with a new mode of transportation. A brand new vehicle that'll put all you bastards out of business.
At the same location, Kyle and his family are waiting for his visiting cousin, who happens to be named Kyle, and with whom Kyle hopes to form a brotherly bond.
Hello, Aunt Sheila.
Unfortunately, his cousin doesn't look or act how he expects, and he ends up living a nightmare when he starts being called Kyle too, and having to live with someone who complains about everything and is completely opposite to him.
Actually, I can't eat beef. I have a degenerative problem with my intestinal lining, and beef really gets me gas.
Things only get worse when Kyle 2's mother tells him, "I'm sorry, buddy, but we have to tell them apart," that she needs to introduce him to her friends, which means he's going to meet all of them. And by all of them, I mean you know who.
What's that thing?
Well, we couldn't expect anything less. Kyle 2 offers Cartman $40 if he can avoid making fun of his cousin under any circumstances, nor make any jokes about Jews.
Could be tough, but I'll give it a shot.
How much money would it take for Cartman to stop making fun of anyone? I'm sure he'd rather die than accept any amount. Anyway, at the same time, Mr. Garrison discusses with Mr. Hat the difficulties of his new invention, which he firmly believes will replace the poor service of the airlines, but things don't go as well as he expected.
The design of our electrical moped were altered with... No, this won't work either.
Mr. Hat has a strange revelation about Enrique Iglesias' butt, and it is thanks to this that Mr. Garrison ends up fitting in his mind the definitive form that he will give to his machine. Maybe Enrique Iglesias should have some percentage of profit in this. Just saying.
I don't know, it was going so fast I couldn't see it, but I want one.
For his part, Kyle 2 is affected by his cousin's annoying behavior, and as we had already predicted, Cartman cannot bear to hold on much longer without bothering him.
Maybe we'll have to send him to concentration camp. Ah! Damn it!
Their promise lasted almost 1 hour, which is way longer than I thought it could. And eventually, Kyle ends up finding out what Kyle 2 negotiated with Cartman, and he's not happy at all. But not for the reasons he should.
Well, I mean, you didn't just start at 40, did you? You gotta lowball these things so you have a place to go.
It's time for the big reveal of IT, the transport designed by Mr. Garrison, and it makes it very clear that although it is a pain in the ass, it never compares to the pain in the ass that airlines generate, literally.
The third flexi grip is gently inserted into the anus to keep the driver in place.
What else could we expect from one of the most perverted and extreme characters in the series? Despite its extravagant and painful design, IT continues to be a better idea than going to airports, and there is no doubt about that. IT starts selling in large quantities, and Mr. Garrison starts making a lot of money from people's butts and mouths. There's no denying that when Mr. Garrison believes in something, no matter how absurd it may sound, he usually sets out to defend it, and well, he succeeds. Meanwhile, the boys begin plotting to get rid of Kyle, and every time, he manages to return home.
I'm back!
So as a last resort, they decide to send him to Connecticut, while telling him it's just a game of hide and seek.
Here, Kai, you hide in here.
He should be more grateful. He didn't have to wait in line to get on the plane, nor wear a butt-hurting IT. Kyle doesn't appreciate the finer things in life. On Mr. Garrison's side, the end of his beloved creation comes, and government agents begin taking away all available models of IT.
Excuse me, what the hell are you doing?
We're just shutting you down.
Once again, big business is involved, and just like the toilet paper industry's attack on Randy, Mr. Garrison is being taken to court for making the airlines lose money. No one messes with the system and remains unscathed, or so I think.
Ah! Airline motherfuckers! You pieces of shit! Cocksucking sons of bitch airlines!
Well, Garrison, it was nice and painful while lasted. At least a lot of South Park butts won't forget you for a long, long time. At the Broflovsky house, Sheila worries about not having seen her nephew in so long, and Kyle hears the dreaded words again.
I'm back!
And just when Kyle thinks he's going to have to deal with his cousin forever, he discovers that Kyle is coming home, and that the fall of IT broke Mr. Garrison's heart and wallet, but did benefit others.
Well, I invested in that IT thing, and there was a bailout, so I received a $5 million bailout clause check, which I can use to help my family. So I guess goodbye, cousin.
After all, it would have been better for him to treat his cousin better. What a shame. And of course, we can't forget when Mr. Garrison's extremist beliefs took him to Canada, made him climb into a barrel to swim over Niagara Falls, and finally overthrow a government in When My Country Gone. The episode opens with a rather odd mix of characters, with Obama introducing Kyle, who is being praised for his speech in support of Caitlyn Jenner. The press conference is being broadcast in a bar where Mr. Garrison is watching Obama's speech on television.
You see? There! This is why it's happening. Everyone's preaching openness and acceptance, and so now millions of goddamn immigrants are coming over the border and nobody seems to care.
Mr. Garrison shows his great intolerance towards Canadians and comes to a conclusion that sounds suspiciously familiar to us.
We should have put up a goddamn wall.
But as always happens, Mr. Garrison always takes his beliefs to extremes, and that's how he ends up teaching a class aimed at hating immigration, while his classroom is 80% full of Canadians, and the situation gets out of hand.
That's it! Why don't you Canucks go back where you came from?
The PC principal ends up warning him that his job is in danger, and that instead of tolerating his xenophobic behavior, he is actually going to send him and the rest of the teachers to learn Canadian. Who would have thought that between two extremists, the PC principal would handle the situation so well? It's kind of like when two negatives make something positive, right?
You're on thin ice, Garrison. Get in line or you'll be out of a job, bro.
However, Mr. Garrison is not the only extremist who thinks that immigration is out of control. And of course, the other character who joins the discrimination train is none other than Eric Hartman, who deals with the situation in a much more particular way.
What if Kyle knowingly gave that speech to get all the illegals in?
A South Park episode without Cartman messing with Kyle is like living without breathing. It's just impossible. But Cartman takes it the other way. For some reason, he feels that the Canadians can turn against the Americans, and he comes up with a magnificent plan in which they can unite both sides.
You know, what's that story about the two sides that were fighting, and then a guy from one side got with a girl from the other side, and their love sort of brought the groups together?
In some twisted way, Butters once again ends up being the protagonist of Eric's plan, as we are used to. And they start the absurd plan of imitating the Lion King the Two and try to get Butters to choose one of the Canadian girls. Funny that whenever someone has to be sacrificed, that someone is never Cartman. Butters chooses Charlotte and wins her over in the best way Butters knows how.
Oh no, Simba, we have barely begun. We'll run away together
And start a pride all of our own.
But Mr. Garrison has a plan that's even more absurd and even less functional than Cartman's. What a surprise that a kid from South Park has a higher IQ than one of the adults. I never would have expected that. After enduring an endless lecture on Canadianism and a deeply uncomfortable anti-Canadian musical number, Mr. Garrison is determined to give it all up to end immigration.
Where my country gone?
Principal PC decides to fire him in front of everyone, and Mr. Garrison simply can't stop his beliefs anymore.
I'm just saying what everyone's thinking here, kid. Sorry, not sorry.
Garrison really takes things to the next level and begins a full-blown campaign against the Canadians, only to find out that his main plan to build a wall between the two countries was already thought up by someone else.
Dan, we're getting word that a wall has already been built.
Oh man, and that was such an original idea. Mr. Garrison and his followers go to find out about the wall and end up getting a huge desire to find out what's behind it. So much so that they seem to forget for a second that they wanted to build it first.
No, fuck them and fuck you. I want to see if they have really cool shit back there.
This is how Mr. Garrison treats his beliefs, as a whim that changes constantly. He finally decides to put himself in a barrel and be thrown into the angel jump so that he can cross to Canada, a very impractical decision.
Bye, Dad.
Plan B to become allies with the Canadians goes better than Butters expected, but there is always that evil voice that reminds you that everything can go wrong, and in Butters' case, that voice is always Cartman.
Nobody cares about 40 years from now when she suddenly changes her mind, Butters. Time is of the essence. We're all gonna die.
Butters decides to ignore Eric and continues to date Charlotte to the point of meeting her family and understanding the reason why immigrants are in the country. And surprise, surprise, it has to do with the president of his country being an idiot who doesn't know how to run a government. Where have I heard that before?
Why would we want to be here?
Well, you know, 'cause everything is great here and we have cool stuff.
Unconsciously, Cartman's plan ends up making Butters live his own movie-like romance, and Charlotte makes Butters understand that it's only a matter of time before the image of Canadian immigrants becomes more positive.
Really know where I'd rather be. If it's okay with you, well, I'd like to try a nice slow Cosby instead.
But representing the extremist and very strange citizens of South Park, Mr. Garrison manages to reach Canada and finds himself in a completely deserted country, where only the president and his guards live.
I came here to find out where my country gone.
Mr. Garrison lives up to his words and ends up overthrowing the Canadian government in a particularly bizarre way.
Hey, did you hear the news, buddy? The Canadian president's been fucked to death.
Now that is a political leader who keeps his promises, although what he promises is illegal, absurd, and completely psychotic. But hey, apparently in politics, anything goes, and Mr. Garrison achieved his goal.
Friends, I think I've proven that my policies work to get things done. I know what my true calling is. And I'm gonna keep this going all the way to Washington!
Totally amazing. It seems that perseverance pays off, even when the goals are not all that positive. In the next 2 episodes on the list, Mr. Garrison's beliefs get out of hand, and he ends up totally changing the future, creating a world full of people wearing condom hats. At the beginning, we see a very anxious Cartman waiting at the door of the video game store for the release of a new Wii console, but he is a little bit before the date.
3 weeks. Come on. Come on!
Meanwhile, at South Park Elementary, Mr. Garrison, who is now Mrs. Garrison, is once again fighting against the system. And after having done it so many times, I'm starting to believe that it's more of a hobby than his true ideals. She says she refuses to teach Darwin's theory of evolution because it is against religion, which Garrison is supposedly on at the time.
Evolution is a theory. A harebrained theory that says I'm a monkey. I'm not a monkey. I'm a woman.
Well, as inclusive as South Park School tries to be, I suppose it has limits in that it obviously cannot please each and every character in the series. Therefore, when Mrs. Garrison teaches the class on Darwinian theory, let's say she exaggerates certain aspects that end up attracting the attention of Catholic parents.
So there you go. You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having butt sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
Totally out of control, Principal Victoria decides that Mrs. Garrison is not the right person to teach the class and decides to bring in a world-renowned evolutionary scientist, Sir Richard Dawkins, and she becomes the class assistant.
Shut up, faggot. Principal Victoria, I can teach my own class.
Things go from bad to worse during class, and Garrison barely lets Professor Dawkins explain anything.
You seen monkeys at the zoo? They crap in their hands and throw it at people.
And when Dawkins admits to being an atheist and not believing in hell, Mrs. Garrison loses absolutely any kind of control over herself. And well, yes, she starts behaving like a total monkey.
If I'm a monkey, then I might as well act like a monkey, huh?
They are both summoned back to the headmistress, and Garrison is almost exiled from the class until something happens that no one was really expecting.
Principal Victoria, I really don't think that's necessary. This woman is very opinionated, but she does care about her students.
This makes absolutely no sense, but somehow, Garrison's madness ends up hooking Dawkins, and he invites her to dinner. And yes, all this without even having changed his shirt.
Well, I suppose we could have a little steak or something.
Meanwhile, Cartman can't sleep because he's thinking about the Wii and decides to make the most logical decision Eric Cartman's mind can come up with.
Freeze myself. If I freeze myself, then in 3 weeks when Nintendo Wii comes out, you guys can unfreeze me. The wait will seem instantaneous to me.
I hope they weren't disappointed after all. Logic is never on Cartman's side. In the end, the boys refuse to freeze him alive, which is, well, what anyone would do, and he decides to find the only person who would agree to do such a thing.
Okay.
I don't know if Butters would be the best friend for always supporting him, or the worst for always supporting him too. Both boys go to the mountains, and Cartman is buried in the snow.
No matter what happens, Butters, you are not to unfreeze me until the day Nintendo Wii comes out. You got it!
At least it's not Butters who's buried in the snow this time, right? Dawkins and Garrison's date is going too well for the start they had, but a small issue of difference in beliefs comes between the two a bit.
So much spunk, so much life. If only you were an atheist.
Well, you know, I'm open to stuff.
Wait. Are you telling me that even though we've seen you start a war campaign against immigrants, throw feces in your classes, and do everything possible to make the airlines go bankrupt, you are open to stuff? Garrison's beliefs are definitely not only absurd, but also an excuse to be an extremist. This is how a weak argument about comparing God to a flying spaghetti monster is enough to change their beliefs.
My eyes are open. Hey everyone, I'm an atheist.
There you have it. The class dynamic changes completely, and now Mrs. Garrison condemns anything that is not atheist in class.
Oh, retard alert! Retard alert, class! Do you believe in a flying spaghetti monster too, Bubblehead?
Once home, Dawkins is just beginning to realize who he's messing with, and when he tries to tell him that what he did in class was wrong, Mrs. Garrison shows her true colors, an extremist psychopath who will take any belief and push it to its limits.
I've just been too soft on religious people in the past. Think about it, Richard. With your intellect and my balls, we can change the future of the world.
However, Cartman, now completely frozen, manages to travel back in time until he is awakened in the year 2546. Humanity has completely changed, and all his loved ones have died.
I don't care! Is there a Nintendo Wii?
There we have it. Not even 500 years can change Cartman. The police start looking for Eric, and they arrive at Butters' house, who denies having seen him, but runs to find him when he fears he's dead. Maybe it's a little late to consider that possibility, Butters. Finally, Butters goes to where he thinks he remembers leaving Eric and realizes that he's not there, and that's probably going to get him into a lot of trouble.
Nobody is ever going to find his body. You've got to never say anything about this, you understand? He's dead! And if they know you had a hand in it, you'll go to jail!
Which of Cartman's plans isn't a potential trip to jail? Butters ends up running away, while Cartman is pleased in the future when he's given a Nintendo Wii, but on the condition that he gives them information about someone from his past.
We believe that somebody you knew in your time was the person who first started our wonderful group, the Unified Atheist League.
The doctor is unable to finish saying who the person is that they need information about, and what begins is a war of atheists against atheists and otters. All signs point to Mrs. Garrison being the culprit of an absurdly atheistic future, and the continuation of the episode. It begins with Cartman stealing the Nintendo Wii and fleeing in the middle of the battle.
Sorry, Blavius. I've got other plans.
In summary, in 2546, the three groups of atheists continue looking for ways to attack each other. Cartman is unable to use the Wii at that time, and gets a toy with which he can make calls to the past, and thus manages to communicate with himself. And although it sounds totally absurd and incredible, he does not believe himself.
I'm you in the future! You have to be patient and wait for the Nintendo Wii to come out, or else you wake up in the future and have to deal with a bunch of sea otters! Oh, very funny, Kyle. It's not Kyle, it's you!
Now we discover that the only one Cartman can't influence or manipulate is himself. Funny, right? Cartman tries to call Butters so he doesn't help him freeze, and then Kyle and change the future a little by doing so, but in both attempts, he fails. It is then when he is about to surrender to the destruction of the future by the Great War, generated by a disagreement on the name that atheists should use, and guided by the extremist ideals of Mrs. Garrison, who, with the help of Dawkins, built a future in which people are taught that more important than beliefs is to belittle and humiliate those who do not think like you. Are we sure it's 2546? Because it sounds exactly the same as it does now. Finally, Cartman's futuristic pet, Kit 9, gives him the answer to the call he must make to save the world.
Your teacher, the one called Garrison.
And in some strange and unintentional way, Cartman saves the day.
Just pass the phone to whatever Garrison wants to call himself since the sex change operation!
Sex change operation?
After all, the truth did save the world, and even though Cartman is sent back to his timeline 2 months before the Wii's release, making all his efforts worthless, at least another one of Mr. Garrison's absurd extremist ideas didn't destroy the future. I love happy endings, and although it would seem that one person cannot defend so many ideals in one lifetime, Garrison proves that many things can be done in one. Man, woman, straight, Christian, atheist, and yes, also defend lesbian rights as in D-Yikes. In Season 11, it all starts when Mrs. Garrison arrives to class in a bad mood and complains about how terrible her date went.
Hey, did you used to be a guy or something? I'm a woman now, so what's it matter?
So she decides to do what every responsible adult in South Park would do, which is to take out his frustration on the kids.
I'm assigning all of you weekend homework. You are going to read Hemingway's book, The Old Man and the Sea.
I'm sure a lot of the extra assignments in school were for the same reason. So Cartman decides that they don't need to do the essay, and that he has the perfect way to pass the class, which of course is not legal or ethical at all.
Passer! Okay, Passer! Looking for work, see?
You know what they say, in a world where you can be anything, don't be Cartman. The boys end up hiring the Mexican day laborers, but with some language difficulties.
We need you to work together, read the book, and write 4 essays. Comprende? La Samarizia.
For her part, Mrs. Garrison goes to the gym to continue complaining about men, or whatever else she would go to, and ends up meeting Allison, a lesbian woman who mistakes Garrison's signals and invites her to a bar called Les Bos.
Oh, you'd love it. It's the only bar in town where women like us can hang out and be ourselves.
And although Garrison is anything but innocent, she acts surprised when she discovers that Allison took her to a gay bar.
Oh, this is wrong. You're another woman. It doesn't make sense.
Anyways, Garrison once again ends up having intimate contact with someone he just met. And although it doesn't help his mental state of beliefs about himself, since, well, we're obviously talking about a heterosexual relationship, which is what he never identified with as a man, it does help the boys have a better time in class, since none of the group did their homework, because they trusted Cartman's plan that failed due to a language problem.
Well, my essay lives in Miami. I wrote to him like you said, but I don't think he got the letter yet.
Mrs. Garrison's good humor benefits them, but as punishment they have to listen to every detail of his love life and his new interest in women, although compared to writing an essay, it seems like a small sacrifice.
That's great! Let's hear it for teacher being a lesbian!
And although everything seems to be going perfectly in Mrs. Garrison's life, when she returns to the bar, she discovers that it is closing because the place has been bought.
Well, it's true. I just talked to the owners. They've sold the bar to Persians.
And as is not surprising, Mrs. Garrison, who has been a lesbian for exactly 1 weekend, decides that she will fight for the cause and will not allow it to be shut down.
Aren't going anywhere. We have a history here. Persians are closing this bar over my dead lesbian body.
When the Persians arrive to redecorate the business, Garrison is waiting for them with an army of lesbians ready to fight for their beliefs.
No, this isn't crazy. This is Lesbos!
The war has just begun, and it seems that neither side wants to give up. And although Garrison's incredible persistence wins the first fights, they need another plan, so they resort to infiltrating the Mexican day laborers with the Persians and getting information that will give them the advantage to win the war.
¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó? Looking for work? See? Trabajo?
Wait a minute, are you trying to tell me that most of the time, Garrison and Cartman have the same ideas? They are both extremists, egocentric, and let's face it, terrible people. Who would have thought it? After a makeover by the Mexicans, they manage to infiltrate the Persian ranks and bring with them valuable information for Lesbos.
I know you're actually a woman.
I think the undercover job went much better than the rehearsal, and ultimately Mr. Garrison resolves the situation the only way he knows how, and that's by pleasing himself regardless of what he believed 2 hours ago.
Have you never even thought of being with another woman before?
Once again, the day is saved by what's under Mr. Garrison's pants. However, even though he always reacts in a ridiculous way, the truth is that Mr. Garrison never stops fighting for what he believes, even if it almost destroys the world twice and starts wars between lesbians, Persians, atheists, and otters.